streaming, so we're just going to wait another couple of minutes. Hopefully my phone says this is all going and streaming beautifully and all of those bits and pieces. Yes, live and more coming. Okay, so thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you if anyone's watching online for coming. I'm Rebecca North, I'm one of the Deputy Principals here at Te Mata School, and this is Jodie Ashby. I'm a teacher, a Year 6 teacher here at Te Mata School, and Little CV. Yeah, so yes, so we do a lot of the professional development that helps our teachers to know what they need to do. There's been a huge amount of changes for teachers and for learners in our curriculum. October last year, the government revised the whole curriculum for us. They were in the process of doing that for a bit of time, and they've made a few changes over time. So for our staff, that's meant changing with your kids at the same time.
Many iterations.
Many iterations. So we're just going to get started because we know that people will come. You may have noticed that on your desks or tables that you have got some games. So one of the things that we want to draw your attention to is we mentioned that we would give you ideas for home. And I think, I'll be honest with you, I'm a working mum, I struggle to get homework done, I feel guilty all the time. And one of the best things that you can actually do is play games with your children, okay? Play games with your grandchildren. For example, those people at home, the game Spot It. I'm working with a literacy group at the moment, and this is a big part of what we do in the time that we're doing reading and writing and spelling. But we also play Spot It. Now, if you've never played Spot It before, it's a visual recognition game, and it's about building your fluency and that recall and finding things. I'm really having to think about my executive function or organising everything that's in front of me.
So your executive function is like your brain's control centre. So that's basically the skills that we need in life to get things done. So you can kind of see these are all the elements of our executive functioning, and really important with learning because they kind of underpin and sit at the foundation of learning. And we find that kids who struggle with their executive function often do have more challenges with their learning. So doing things at home like puzzles and games and all the things that you have in front of you tonight are really helpful in kind of strengthening and improving their executive function.
Yeah. So, and one of the biggest things that often we feel like, what more could we do for our children? And the biggest thing I always talk to Jodie is, talk to your children. We know that oral language is the foundation for everything. Relationships, literacy, maths. So the more we talk, the more we communicate with each other, actually the more our children are learning as we go. And also, I think sometimes we role model to them a bit of executive function, or lack of, sometimes in those bits. So for the people at home, I've also cut up Twister, which one of our teachers, I won't name, donated this to me, which was very lovely. And so it's basic games that you've got at home that you can actually use to help you with spelling and reading as well. So I'll whip that out later on and show you some basic things that you can do with simple things like Twister. So even Connect 4 helps with reading and writing. So all of those things that you do, you might think Yahtzee as well, maths game, actually helps with reading and writing. It's that logic and reasoning and that executive function. So, because we're displaying good executive function tonight, we're going to actually give you a bit of a plan and tell you what you're here for. It might feel like a bit of a whirlwind, where it's like, whoa, those ladies talk really fast and they talk a lot. If it gets too hot, can you please just let us know and we will turn off the heat pump, okay? So let us know and we'll just gauge it from you guys. One of the biggest things too, this is quite an informal session, so if you do have a question and you want to ask it, go for it, okay? And of course there's also whiteboards in front of you as well, so we're going to make some aspects a little bit interactive where you can answer some questions and join in and put some pieces to it, okay? So, what is structured literacy? Reading, how do we teach? Reading supporting at home, reading assessments, what do they look like at Te Mata? And then actually you've heard a lot in the media around how assessment has changed and how we're monitoring learning. So we'll tell you about a few of those changes as well. Okay, so what this lovely document is the driver behind why we run these nights and run these sessions. And our strategic plan, as a community, as a board, as a group of teachers, students, we identified 4 goals. And one of our goals is around building a culture of learning and assessment capability, which is this goal 3. And another one is collaborative community culture. Because we know when we all work together, actually the outcomes for your children, for your babies, are so much greater.
So before we delve into what structured literacy is, we kind of need to understand what the science of reading is. So the science of reading is the body of knowledge that allows us to understand how the brain actually learns to read. And where this body of knowledge came from are all of these amazing experts in their fields here. So cognitive psychologists, neuroscientists, linguists, educational experts. So they all had these amazing evidence and research and knowledge understandings. But they previously sat in silos with that knowledge and with that understanding. So it's the merging together of that knowledge that has formed what we now know as the science of reading. And why is that important? At Tomato School, we use a structured approach to teaching literacy, and that is underpinned by the science of reading.
So what is structured literacy? Because you hear a lot of it. Erica talks about it in the media. You know, she's pumping all that money into structured literacy, PLD, and all of that. So what actually is it? So structured literacy is the embodiment of the science of reading, basically. So you've got science of reading and structured literacy. It's the application of it. It's what we actually do in classes, okay? To make it all happen to help your children read, write, spell, and feel more confident around literacy. Here at Tomato School, it's kind of like an umbrella term, structured literacy, because actually here in some schools when it was first brought in, it would be something that was done in the junior school. You know, you heard that they did structured literacy and they got these books out, and there was Pip and Tim would do all of these things and jump in puddles, well, not in puddles, that's far too complex, because that's a felony division. Actually structured literacy is something that's done across the school from year 0 through to year 6. It's reading, writing, and spelling. It's all of the components of literacy, and it's done in lots of different ways, from whole class teaching to small group teaching, and we're going to talk more about all of that. But we do use in the junior school and into year 3 what we call some staged texts. So stage 1 through to 7.5, and we are linked to an organisation called Liz Kane Literacy and Little Learners Love Literacy. Different schools might say that they link to different programs in different ways. It's the same pedagogy, so it's the same science of reading behind it, same approach, but it's just different characters. Different characters. We quite enjoy that. Okay, so you've got whiteboards in front of you. You don't have to use them, or you can if you want to. Make a prediction. How many ways to spell the sounds in the English language? How many ways do you think there are? And we're talking about the sounds. You know how many letters are in the alphabet, but how many different ways, different spellings can you spell those sounds? Do you want to make a prediction? Anyone?
Lots.
Lots, I like that. Lots, okay. There's actually 250. Okay, English is one of the most complex languages. Okay, so
250 spellings, I think, 26 letters, 44 sounds, different sounds, so it is complex.
Yeah.
So it's not nonsensical. There is, obviously we teach the code, so it is structured, it is systematic, but it is complex. So I think our words are derived from Old English, Latin, Greek, French, hence why there are so many of them. And I think over time, our pronunciation of those sounds have changed, but the spelling hasn't.
Umbrella is a great word, you know. Some of us can say that in different ways, like pumpkin. I've always struggled with that one. So, I mean, there's around 150 common ones. So when your kids are going, whoa, you know, the spelling thing's quite hard, Actually it is. Okay. So, another prediction if you want to. How many different ways can you spell the A sound in words? So, for example, cat is a nice one, at. But how many different ways can you spell the A sound? Anyone want to make a prediction? Lots works for this one too. and it's quite funny, I actually asked Patrice this in assembly on Friday. Put her on the spot and said that there's actually 8 different ways you can spell the A sound. Okay, so you've got acorn, cake with a silent A syllable. You've got rain, which is the AI vowel term. You've got day, which is an AY. You've got reindeer as in the EI combination. You have got steak as an EA in steak. You've got 8 as an EIGH. And then you've got hay as an EY. So when your child's going, whoa, which A should I put in there? This is why. This is why. Okay, and this is what Jodie was talking about before. So 50% of the words that we read, spell are predictable. Okay, they generally fall into what we would call, they're the ones that you can do this for on the twister. And sorry, those people at home, you won't see this. So I can go clap, k, la, f, h, clap, and blend through. Okay, I can do all of those sorts of things. Nice and easy. And what we would say there is that you have got a short vowel between the consonant to the right, or the consonant to the right. Yeah, it's a closed syllable. And then 37% of our words are more common words, okay? And then you've got etymology, which is what Jodie was talking about, based on French, Latin, Greek, about a component of them, and then you've got 5% that just make no sense at all. Okay, they're completely irregular and you just have to know them. And we know the more you know. So, like Jodie said, 44 sounds that include 25 consonants and 20 vowel sounds. So from the A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y, there are actually 20 sounds that come out there. Okay? And that's from our 26 letters in the alphabet. So, you know, when we say 250 different ways to spell the sounds, well, that makes sense.
So one of the ways that we teach spelling is we use our reading voice and our spelling voice. So as you know, when we read, we read using our reading voice, so our inner voice, and when we spell, we kind of segment the word, so we segment it into parts and we use our spelling voice. So as an example, when we read the word pigeon, it's orthographically mapped for most of us, and we just read it as pigeon, okay? But when we use our spelling voice, we would read it as pigeon. Pigeon. So I still do that in my head. Some of us still need to do that out loud when we're sounding out words and when we're spelling words. And I have that knowledge, and your children are learning that knowledge of the soft G in pigeon means I read it with a soft sound. So do I use the G or do I use the J? Well, I know that soft C and soft G all have an I, E or Y following them. So I use the soft sound. So I pronounce it as pigeon.
So even the word friends. So friends. That's actually how you spell it if you're using the spelling voice. Okay? So it's and we talk about the vowel table. So there's so many layers of rules and things that teachers are saying, like the soft C is followed by an I, an E, and a Y. You know, cat. That's a hard C. You know, why is it a hard C? Because it's followed by an A. So they're having to know all of these things. They know what consonants are. They're having to know what vowels are and all of those different sounds. So when you look at our vowels, the A, E, I, O, and U, these are all the different spellings to make the sounds. Okay? And then, just to layer in another dynamic, because we know most of the words we read once we get older are multisyllabic, which means multi-syllable words. So for example, I was in Jodie's class the other day and she was teaching the word decipher, and to understand the meaning of that. So that's where then we have to break it down into the syllable division as well. So closed syllables changes what happens with the vowel to an open syllable.
Then we've got, remember I said the word puddle, and I was like, oh no, that doesn't go with Pip and Tim on the mat. Puddle is what we call a consonant LE syllable. So all of these things your children are being taught and having to remember when they're reading and writing. And they need a lot of repetition for this. A lot of repetition, because there's a lot to learn in the English language. Because ideally, we want them to be able to orthographically map all of these words into their memory. And there's a lot of terms in structured literacy. For example, there's phonemes, which is the sound that letters make. There's graphings, the actual letter that the sound represents on paper. And then you've got orthographically mapping. If you think about dentist and braces, the orthodontist, you want to get straight teeth, okay? That's the key objective. Here, you want to get those words straight into your memory. So that's that orthographic mapping, okay? And that's putting words into our long-term memory. So instead of having to, every time I see fish, go fish, I can look at fish and go fish. Because that's what we're wanting to do. Now, for some children that takes longer. Then, on top of that, we're going to chuck in some morphology as well. Okay, and these are words we use with your children. We don't dumb it down for them. When we're talking about morphology, we talk about morphology. And we talk about that being the study of morphemes, the smaller parts of meaning. So, before I got here today, this room was very untidy. But with thank goodness the cleaners came. And now it's very tidy. Absolutely, that little changes the meaning of it. It morphs it into something else.
So we're looking at our prefixes, our suffixes, and our root words.
Okay. So that was a really quick speed dating version of what structured literacy is. We're going to keep on building on it, but we're going to try and blend it into the context of what we're talking about. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Right. Okay. So this feeds us into, I love a bit of math. Anyone who knows me knows that. So in the simple view of reading, we actually have to do a bit of multiplication. Okay? We need to multiply two things to get to reading comprehension. We can't just do one and not the other. So the first one is word recognition. Okay? So we actually need to remember fish. Instead of being fish, I've got to get that orthographically mapped, and I've got to be able to actually decode those words. Okay, and so we work really hard on that in the first so many years at school. But also, and the juniors, we also need to work on this one as well. Language comprehension. So, language comprehension is, for example, when you're reading at home and you're reading a picture book to your baby or Harry Potter in bed at night and you're talking about it, you're actually developing their language comprehension. You're developing this part of the simple view of reading. Okay, so actually that's what I mentioned at the beginning, that oral language, that talking to your children is the most powerful thing you can do. Sharing stories.
It's syntax, it's sentences, putting words together.
So even the tone we use sometimes, stop it, get off the bench, all of those bits and pieces. They're learning from us. All of that syntax. They're imagining, that's probably got an exclamation mark at the end of that one. Because I'm really commanding it. So they can't actually be done in isolation. So, to actually just say you just work on decoding words the whole time and ignore reading to them, ignore talking to them about anything else, you're never going to get to reading comprehension. You've got to do them alongside each other.
So if we have 0 times 1, if we have no word recognition, we don't have the ability to decode those words, but we have a good understanding if someone's reading it to us, we're still not going to be proficient readers. Okay? And if we have the other way around, where we might be really fluent readers and be able to decode really complex texts, but we have 0 language comprehension, then we still can't get to that proficient reading.
And you will hear, you may be aware that we're running an evening, hosting an evening for dyslexia and learning about dyslexia later on in the term.
there are so many different layers to reading. There's hyperlexia. Hyperlexia is when you can read any word on a page but you actually have no meaning or language comprehension that sits behind it. So we know so much about reading, and I guess when we get to the assessment part, we've got tools to help us know where your children are working and how they're doing. So we're not going to touch too much on dyslexia tonight, because just know that we will talk about that later on. So there we go, word recognition times language features. So this is a picture of your reading brain, okay? So going back to this one here, imagine we only worked on word recognition. When Jodie and I were talking about this in analogy words, ideas, I love an analogy. Imagine going to the gym or Pilates or whatever you do and only working on your arm muscles. Your legs are going to go at the pack. You know, they're never going to be able to do anything, because actually you need to work on collectively all your muscles. It's the same for your reading brain, okay? We need to be working on our letter and word recognition alongside our language comprehension and our word analysis and sound symbol connection, and making all those connections, and we need to be working on our speech and sound. We know the dyslexic brain actually doesn't map like the non-dyslexic brain. So there are some things that are being investigated now, so we might touch on that later on at the other night.
Kind of develops an understanding that the human brain, we're not wired to learn, we're not wired to read, okay? We weren't born to know how to read. It actually needs to be explicitly taught. So we need all of these parts of our brain to be firing when we're explicitly teaching reading.
And if they're not firing, we need to put in the supports to help that area of the brain be supplemented, or to help alongside. Okay, so we love a good rope. Education loves ropes, okay, because we like to entwine everything together. So this is a really great visual showing that actually this is your word recognition here, which is your phonological awareness, your syllables, your phonics, which is your sounds. You're being able to decode, your sight recognition, oh, that's cat. Actually has to be interwoven with background knowledge. That's the stuff you talk to them about. It's we went to the beach, we went to McDonald's, we went to the supermarket. You know, all of that contextual stuff that you do every day weaves into their language comprehension. Vocabulary. We know that that is one of the key things you can do. Teach your children new words. Teach them about language through actually not just saying, God, I had a great day, well, that's a little bit boring, but you know, my day was superb. You know, mix it up, because the more we use that language as well, we're teaching them alongside and actually explicitly telling them, not asking them to guess what it means. We know they can't guess, and we know if we let them guess, we might create a misconception. So actually, tell them. Superb means pretty good. Okay. Language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge, so it's so multifaceted, and that's all going on at all times during reading. And we know that reading happens in science and every facet of the day, maths, you name it.
So this is structured literacy in a nutshell, and this is what we explicitly teach here at Tamata.
Okay, so these are the types of books that you might use for language comprehension. It's the picture books, it's the contextual stuff, there's Pip and Tim and Sam, and Bugs and all of those bits. We call those our decodable books. Hey Jacks are awesome. So if your child is stuck on reading Billy B. Brown or Hey Jack or Olivia and I've forgotten, Ella and Olivia, they're actually brilliant books for building fluency. It doesn't matter if they've read them 300 times, they will stop reading them once they get bored. And if they are still reading them, they're actually developing automaticity of the words within it and their confidence. So don't get caught up on, I'll get them onto something else. If they're actually reading it and they're still getting enjoyment, promote it. Okay, so on to our Percy Jacksons and whatnots. Oh, I'm a bit happy today. Okay, so decodable text. I talked a bit before about, in our junior school we use Little Learners Love Literacy and Liz Kane aligned. So we have stages 1 to 4, and that covers individual letter sounds, like and that's where your kids might come home and go, that's my monkey, that's Daisy dog, you know, all of those things, and they go cat, and all of those bits. Stage 4 plus to 6, which is around where we would want to see them if they were tracking, you know, if they were tracking according to the ministry's sort of guidelines, around learning that extended code. So that's that floss. You might hear them talking about the floss, the S, the Z, the F. I'm quickly thinking the L, yes, the L, good old L, and all of those. And that's where they start getting into the digraphs. And so digraphs are 2 letters that make one sound. We talk to them about those rules. Jodie, what's a diagram? 2 letters, one sound. You know, give me an example of a diagram. So all of those bits and pieces, and so we're always, I know, it's like we're asking you times tables. And then when we get to stage 7, which is probably year 2 or the second year at school, some of your children, when you actually chose to give birth to them, impacts when and how they might be developing through this as well. So that start date at school does actually impact this. So if you think about it, around their second year at school, this is the sort of things we would want to be seeing. That they learn that vowel code, you know, the A and the I together makes the long A vowel sound. It's those vowel teams we talk about them. Okay, we talk about suffixes, we talk about all the spelling rules. So basically they're getting all of it from the reading code under their vowels in the first couple of years into year 3, and that's when they can read to develop their for mastery, okay, and they become more fluent as readers. They might still be reading Billy B. Brown, they're not up to Percy Jackson yet, and there's nothing wrong with that, but actually they're more fluent readers because they've got a good understanding of the code. Okay.
And we have our comprehension, which builds, as you can see, it builds step by step as well. And it's not just from years 3 to 6, they're building that right from the word go. But we do start at that word level, so vocabulary and explicit teaching of words really matters. And then we move to sentence level. So we're teaching syntax and the structure of how we put words together in a sentence and making sense of sentences. Then we go to our passages. So we're looking at how sentences build on one another and building our understanding at that sentence to sentence level. And then we can go to articles. So we know that the more we know, the better readers we are. So more stuff you know, the more stuff we can read, essentially. And then we go to the book level, so your text, your novels, we're getting that really rich comprehension, depth of understanding when we get to that level. And then we can start making connections across texts as well. So we're developing those critical thinking skills.
I'm going back to the games, because remember we said about games and playing games. So this is spot it, right? On this card you have to be able to explicitly name it. So it's actually got the Canadian maple leaf on it. So that's where you can teach them, oh, well that's the maple leaf that's on the Canadian flag. It's all of those bits and pieces, and actually, well that's a bullseye. So it's stuff we know, but we can't assume that they know that. So this is a form of reading and language development as well.
So what actually is fluency? It's made up of 3 parts, and obviously if we have a fluent reader, then we have proficient readers. So fluency is accuracy, so that's reading with few errors. So that's we're trying to ensure that our decoding skills are really accurate. And then our reading speed, and that's not really fast reading, that's reading at a rate which is acceptable, which is probably not how we speak because we speak quite quickly, but we're reading using the punctuation. So we have a certain reading rate.
And we actually have different reading rates per age.
Yeah.
So, and that is something that we monitor with your children, how many words they're reading per minute. And so therefore we're wanting to see that reading word rate per minute going up every year. We know that actually fast readers don't necessarily have good comprehension. So there's like a sweet spot. So if you get faster than you need to be, you're not actually taking in everything. okay? You're not consuming the content as well. So we need to keep an eye on that as well.
And then our third element is prosody. So that's reading with expression, that's using our intonation, that's our phrasing as well. So that's using the punctuation to help guide us with our fluency. And yeah, we do find that those kids that are reading for speed often are not paying attention to that punctuation, which means it's limiting their understanding of text.
Because, for example, some of you might have seen on Facebook or somewhere in magazines or something, the picture of the crocodile, and it says, it's got a picture of a crocodile and it says, crocodiles don't swim here. Now, if you just read that, you go, oh, no crocodiles swim here, I'm good to go, I'll get in here. But what it's actually inferring is, there are crocodiles, so don't swim here. So
Punctuation matters.
Punctuation matters, all of it matters, and also that contextual background. If I'm in Australia and I see one of those signs, I'm probably not going to go swimming, but if I'm in New Zealand, I'm probably going to go, okay, I think I might be okay. So that's that background knowledge, that's really important. So fluency isn't reading, okay? It's reading fast. It is reading, sorry. It's reading accurately, with automaticity, and with expression. There's some amazing researchers out there who are providing us with all of this. Jan Hasbrook is one of them, who describes fluency as the bridge between decoding and comprehension. So when we are more fluent, that actually helps us to be able to comprehend what we're reading.
I think that last part is really important too. So when students are reading with accuracy, with expression, and they're fluent readers, their brains are actually freed up to think about the meaning. So they're not in cognitive overload, consumed with trying to decode each word of the text.
And probably a big change for us. I'm a baby of the 80s education system, you know, so we had the books with pictures and we would just guess. Guess those words because we came out of a system that didn't teach, and hey, it was no one's fault, it was just that at the time this was how we were educated. We were taught to read the clues around it, to look at the picture, to do all of those bits and pieces. Well, we know that that can build up misconceptions of what words mean, increase error rates. So actually, there is nothing wrong with saying to your children, no, that's carrot. And getting them to reread the sentence with the word accurately in there. Or, for example, you might actually read it to them. So one of the big things too, we've talked a lot about spelling, we've talked a lot about reading, but also in there with structured literacy sits writing. The importance of writing is, we say read it, so decode it, and then encode it. Encode it means to write it. Okay, so read it, write it, say it, spell it, do everything with it.
And you'll notice that this one is the not so simple view of writing, so we have the simple view of reading. That's because writing is a really cognitively complex task, and you'll see all of the elements that you need to be a proficient writer. Now here we have our executive function, which we talked about earlier. That's kind of your director that allows you to actually write and to think of your ideas and to plan and motivate and to self-regulate and self-manage and to initiate the task and see it through to the end and to actually understand what the end point looks like. So we start here and then we have our transcription skills. So these are handwriting or typing, spelling, your basic punctuation. We really want children to develop automaticity at this level, the transcription level, because if they do, then that cognitive load of transcription is taken away. If we can take one of these elements away, then they can actually just focus on the composition, on the ideas. But if they're still struggling with handwriting, if they're still struggling with spelling, then that's once again another cognitive load that makes it tricky for them. So they're trying to balance and juggle all of these in one go, which is really complex.
It is. So to work on executive function at home, that's why we say play games. Because it's not something you can sit down and study executive function. You can't go, okay, now I'm going to give you a quiz on executive function. You actually, that's your planning and your motivation and your drive to do everything and get things done. So it's helping put your children into situations where they can practice that executive function. And I guess, work that muscle. I guess, at home it's that importance of, yes, actually handwriting is really important. And all you've got time for them to do if you've got a 5-year-old is to write their name really neatly on a line. That actually is really important. Or to write as many letters of the alphabet they know. That's a great, with the correct letter formation. So that's, like Jodie is saying, it's giving them the automaticity of being able to then apply that shape when they need it for cat or Tim. Okay, so supporting reading at home. We've kind of been touching on a few things as we've been going, and I guess it's supporting writing at home too. One of the biggest things we like to give you is a bit of research. So this came our librarian, Nikki, gave us this visual. She went to a seminar with other librarians, and this is research that's come out around reading of different types and actually at what ages and stages everything drops off. So basically we know reading books independently. Oh yes, tracking along nicely. We hit our peak at about 8 to 10. That's 40% of what we do, and then we know it dips off. So if I'm already someone who's not feeling so good about reading, and I'm going to dip off earlier, actually it's going to be harder for me to get back to that enjoyment level. We know that teens, when we look at it, this grey line here is your text message. Okay, your blue is you watching TV, films on devices, Netflix, Disney, you name it. Okay, and then this dark blue one here is your websites and hobbies. So we've got to build that love of reading independently, and I think the best thing you can possibly do is model it yourself. It's easier said than done. It's on my bucket list that I'm going to read my novel for 10 minutes at the same time as my daughter has to read her novel. She's a year 6, reluctant reader. She'd rather be kicking a softball. Okay? So actually, that's one simple thing I can do. But I've got to prioritise that. And to be honest, I'm not doing very well. Okay? And I know that's my work on. But it's getting your kids to read everything or anything. If there's something with words on it, get them to read it. And so I do get my daughter to read me some of my texts sometimes, because actually then I know she's reading. Not all of them. Not all of them. But, she actually does read stuff. And she does read NZ News, because she's that sort of year 6 child who is driven by factual content. I'm just trying to get her to read in any way I can. So that's a bit of the why we need to keep that love of reading going. This forgetting curve. Some of us might feel like we are forgetting more of late than before. So basically we know that, say I teach you something, within an hour, I've taught you something, right? Within an hour I've dropped off. I've only got about 50% of it left. Okay, unless I've got the opportunity to practice it and recall it and all of those bits and pieces. After a day I'm at 40%. Okay? 3 days, whew, I'm down below that 30. And then by the end of the 6 days, I've got a 1 in 5 chance of maybe remembering. So we know the more repetitions we put in place.
It's hard to see those lines.
So if with this one here, on the 3rd repetition here, we'll actually get up to about 70% retention. So if your kids are coming home saying, oh, they're making me do the same thing again, that diagram, she keeps on going on about it, what is it? It's actually because we know the more repetitions we have of something, the more likely we are to remember it. And it's not repetitions 1 now and 1 next month. Time counts. The longer we leave it, the more likely they are to forget. Once it's in our long-term memory, it means it's learned. That's how we know we've learned something, when it's in our long-term memory. If it's still in our working memory, we haven't learned it yet. Okay? That's actually the definition of learning. It's got to be in our long-term memory. So repetition counts. Okay, so repetition can happen through lots of ways. Your children are tired. At the end of the day, they've worked really hard here at school. We know that because well, I'm in the classrooms all the time.
Because we're really tired.
We're really tired as well. So hence why I'm not doing a very good job of reading my novel, I just need to lie. So one of the things you can do is reading Harry Potter together or reading the newspaper together, whatever you read. And they actually read along with you, they track with you. Okay?
So you could be reading it aloud, they're tracking with you. They might echo you, you might read it together, you might do some shared reading. But that reading aloud is really important. That reading aloud really helps improve and boost fluency. Yes, it's wonderful for them to be reading on their own in their rooms as well. Of course, we want them to get that enjoyment and love out of reading. But if you're really trying to encourage their reading and specifically their decoding skills, their reading with them is really important.
And some of you might have some of those, and I know I was one of them, fake readers. I'll just open a book. And I'll turn the pages every so often. And I'll make up something about the story because I know you haven't read it and I know you're not going to. You know what I mean? We all know of a child like that. So actually this is a great strategy of exposing them to reading. So
this is something we use in class as well. Yeah. So in our whole class teaching approach, we have the students track with us if we're reading aloud to them. We have them echo us, they read with us, so that they're actually hearing, we're modelling what good reading and fluent reading sounds like. So they can hear that, they're reading alongside with us, they're reading with a fluency buddy as well, so they have the opportunities to read to a buddy, and they also have the opportunity to read to themselves.
And the biggest thing is, a lot of your kids will know, and I've talked about it openly before, I've always struggled with reading. So at school, I was the child in the intervention room. And so therefore, back in the good old 80s, that meant that I only read Pip, Tim and Sam, you know, all those sorts of books. And had a ceiling put on me. We don't do that here at Timata. All of our children in year 4, so if I think of Alicia's room, Alicia Russell, at the moment they're reading Charlotte's Web, the whole class. It doesn't matter where you're at your reading stage or ability, everyone's reading Charlotte's Web and supporting through. Jodie, what are you reading at the moment?
So we are reading The Last Year by Hannah Gold. So that's, it's not a New Zealand novel, but she's an amazing author, Hannah Gold, and it's kind of part of a series.
And so Jodie has an array of readers in her room, but the whole class is reading that novel because we need to make sure that all children have access to curriculum content at their year level and building their vocabulary at their year level. Even if they might struggle with reading some of the words, there's no barrier to understanding that language comprehension. We just need to put in the scaffolds and supports to help them access that. So, automaticity, I have talked a lot about that. Say, for example, I was gifted. I am at some things, not cooking. 1 to 4 repetitions potentially to learn something. Okay? For the typical student, it might be 4 to 14. For a struggling student, someone who's, just hanging in there, it might be 14 to 40 exposures to that same thing. And then me, who's self-diagnosed dyslexic, actually it could be 40, and I've even read up to 400 exposures to something. So when you feel like, I'm just not getting it, actually, they need multiple. I can't just teach them I feel superb once and then give them a quiz on it. What does superb mean? I told you that like 3 weeks ago. What did that mean? You've got to be continuously building that vocab and that repetition. You'll know your kids. I'm not saying if your child's here they're dyslexic, I'm just saying they might need more repetitions because they're just not ready to learn that yet. Okay, I'm going to pause this. So, I'm going to put this in the chat because some of you will have junior children who come home and they're like, that's Mum, monkey, and they're like, Mum, you're saying wrong. You're saying it wrong, Mum. All of those bits and pieces, and actually, how do I say all of the sounds? There's an amazing lady named Imanana. Now, she's a speech language therapist, and I think she's a speechologist or something really flash like that. And she's made this video where if I just whiz it along, and it will be too loud
so apologies. And I'm going to get to the part. So basically, it goes through and it tells you about the speech sounds and why it's important. But I want you to look at this wee girl. So she's teaching us actually how to say the sound correctly. One of the biggest things, our faces do different things. Sally Snake, I kind of get a smile on. Cycle, which sounds very similar from the soft C, I don't get my smile on. So actually, even watching this video with your children, to watch how the lips move, how the mouth moves, it's all of those different pieces as well that you take into consideration when you are supporting your children. And because you don't know, you weren't necessarily taught in this way, so how are you meant to know? So this is just like a cheat sheet, not saying you have to watch it, but it's there if you're wondering, well, how do I make that monkey sound without giving it what's called a schwa? You know, and Jodie, what is a schwa?
It's the unstressed syllable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So that one is
I know,
I know, that one's a really computer. That one will get your children every time. It's in the code. Okay, so tonight we will put on our website page, which is parent information, education information. We'll put it down like this, and we'll also put the slides here and the links to the Emanana. We'll put everything onto this page. This page, if I just click out of it for a second. Oh God, get nervous with the tabs. This page actually has all of our previous events that we've run as well on maths. And it actually has resources in here too around, I know this is not about maths, but around what numbers should look like at each year group for your child, and what's the stuff that you can be practicing at home. And then for writing, for example, if I click here, it's got a book that says this is the sort of stuff my child should be focusing on in writing at year, here we go, year 5. Should be doing stories with descriptive words that help the reader to see, hear, smell, taste, or feel what is happening. So it gives you a bit of a nutshell, well, actually what should they be learning in writing, okay? So that is all on our website under the parent help aspect, okay, under this page. We're actually linking this page on our mid-year reports as well, so that when you get it sent to you on your phones or on your emails, you can click on the link, which will take you directly there. Okay, because the curriculum's changed. There's no getting around it, so how do you know when it's completely different from what it was like when you were at school? So, also the Ministry of Education and the government has created what's called the Parent Portal. It's like, whoa, how many days or weeks do you want to lose? Okay, so this is a very informative site, but it's got many layers where you can delve down and find out, well, what actually is the curriculum for a Year 2 child look like, and you know, all of those bits and pieces. So we're linking this to our mid-year report as well, so you can click on it, rather than say, take your child to the library, which we know you do anyway, or you know, play games with them. We've already said that. Rather than putting things like that, we've got practical. Actually, these are the things you can do at home if you want to. Okay. Let's run it quicker. Okay. Any questions so far? That's been like whirlwind speed dating once again. No. We can save those to the end. Okay. So assessment. If I just go back here, we assess children. Okay, just like your doctor does, just like the police do when you're driving. Everyone, we're basically being assessed a lot of the time. Okay, so this is a really complex breakdown, but I just want to draw your attention to the top left-hand corner. Structured literacy is underpinned by good assessment and feedback. Assessment, which is when we give tests and or take samples from children and work, actually needs to be followed by feedback. You might remember doing the PAT test back when you were at school and never knowing how you went. You know, having no idea as a learner around actually how did I go in that assessment or how am I going is not very empowering. It leaves you with that sense of doubt as to your
ability. I'm still desperate to know, how did I go on those tests? Now,
It gives them agency of their own learning too, doesn't it?
it does. So here at Te Mara, and your children's writing books at the back, they've got their writing goals. And in the juniors, they've got these yellow cards that flip out and tell them what they're working on. And in the middles and seniors, and throughout their books, they've got success criteria that tells them, okay, if you're working on this goal, these are the things that you need to do. All of that is feedback, helping them to understand why they need to do it or how they need to do it. So it's multifaceted. It's not just one test on one day like the government would have you believe with, say, doing it at mid-year and end-year, okay? This is kind of a weird word, Dibels. Okay, we Dibels all of your children. It's basically, this is in reading, we take every child's temperature in the school 3 times a year at least. Okay, everyone. And we use a tool that has been used on millions of children around the world. So it is normed. So we know that the data and the information coming from it is aligned to the age and stage across not just New Zealand but internationally. Okay? So we take their temperature 3 times a year at least. For some children we take their temperature a lot more because we just want to know that they are making progress. Because actually, like I talked about myself, my increments of progress were quite different from Jodie's. Okay, so I was still making progress and I needed to have that valued. Whereas Jodie would have been only having her temperature taken maybe 3 times a year. So we have a whole bunch of systems, and this is where we do like a 1 minute, just read this to me for 1 minute, and we count the words, and that's where we're doing the words per minute. We also look at non-words, which is we call nonsense words. Okay, so that might be, luckily I've got a slide with one on it coming up. That comes out of the University of Oregon. Okay, and a lot of schools. So in our curriculum now, it talks about being able to read at a rate expected for your year group in our reading curriculum. Okay. So for some children like me, actually deeper analysis is required. You've taken my temperature and we've recognised that there's something not quite right. So we need to actually diagnose what's going on with me. Okay? So we've got other tools that then we use to diagnose. Just like doctors, you know. We then, and it's a little learner's love literacy assessment that we do that allows us to be able to see, it's actually, I've got a confusion with, every time I see the letter S, or I say S, I don't actually say S. So what's my confusion? So that then the teachers can target that confusion and teach to that, versus just continuing to do the same and expect a different outcome. So we diagnose really specifically. And for any children we're diagnosing, we closely monitor. And that's regularly a few times a term. So teachers can talk to you about all sorts of things like that and deeper analysis. And then we also have teacher observations, because actually one of the things that you might find out about Jodie, she's quite shy even though she's sitting here with me today. So she's not your natural read out loud sort of person. She's wanting to do that by herself, thank you. Okay? So actually getting alongside Jodie and actually knowing her really well and observing her, putting her in that situation of a 1 minute assessment or a diagnosis assessment under pressure, she's not going to cope. So that's where I need to know her, and I need to know what's right for her. So there's a whole bunch of factors that go into when we're actually working with your children to figure out what they need to learn or how they're going and tracking. So through that Dibels, we can also tell if your child is reading too fast. Okay, and we can measure if they've got too many words per minute and all of those bits and pieces, because it's a determiner of comprehension how many words per minute they read. Some of you might have heard the government talking about the 20 and 40 weeks phonics assessment or the phonics check. So these are examples from the phonics check. So at 20 weeks at school, which is the first 6 months, and 40 weeks, which is after the first year at school. It's not your birthday, it's actually, so for example, I've done this assessment on some year 3s who've come from international schools. So of course they've only done 20 weeks in the New Zealand English system, so it's not just your 5-year-olds, okay? So these ones with the blue dots are what we call our nonsense words. They're our, you've got leg, What I'm doing there is not saying if they can, well, of course I'm saying if they can blend through and read leg, but I'm actually identifying whether they've got the lip, and then can they actually hold that and remember it and blend it together. That's quite complex. For some of our little people, they can go lip, leg, because that's a lot to remember. You know, I haven't had enough exposure. Sub is an actual word. Okay, so this test has non-words that are helping us to see whether they've got diagraphs, whether they've got vowel teams, and all of those bits and pieces. And it's a tool that we can use to diagnose and just know how they're tracking. And then what the government has given us is some progress descriptors. We love terms for everything, okay? So, and what they've said is, if your child scores here, they get this descriptor, okay? We can say they're proficient, or we can say they're developing, okay? The teacher looks at that information and goes, oh, that's feedback for me on my teaching. I now know I need to teach her the. She hasn't got it, but she's going, not that, okay? She's not saying that diagram. And what we actually then can identify from that phonics check and all our assessments is actually some children are fine with what we call universal learning, which means that whole class learning. They can sit and be with the whole class reading the novel and they're just going to be just fine. They're catching everything in the moment. They're reading, they're getting the vocab, they're bringing all of their connected world into it. But then we know that some children need targeted assistance. They need a bit more support. But they also need to still have their universal. Just because I'm getting targeted doesn't mean I don't have the right to have the universal, which means access to what everyone else is having. I just need a bit more, and I call that double dipping them. Okay? And then we've got some children who need a bit more tailored as well. They might be getting whole class, small group, and one-to-one. Okay? But they're being triple dipped. They're not just being singled out and put in a corner and made to do a separate program. They're getting exposed to the whole parameters of the curriculum.
So everyone gets everything.
Everyone gets everyone. Thanks. Okay, so that was a quick version of that. But basically, I wanted to touch on a few of the assessments that you might have heard about. So another one we've talked about or touched on was the fact that we have to do in year 3, 4, 5 and 6 a standardised assessment twice a year. Okay, as a school we've chosen to do what's called the SMART tool. You might have heard that talked about in the media, the SMART tool. Okay, and that's the assessment package that we're using. It's the one that the government is developing and all schools will probably have to use next year.
The key word from the principal of the school is they are developing it, please.
Yeah, so it is under development. They are building the plane as they're flying it, and we're helping them build as they do it as well. Your children may have or will have done a reading, writing and a maths SMART assessment if they're in year 3, 4, 5 and 6. For some children though, if actually we feel it's not right for them, we've got the other assessments that we use instead. Okay, so this is an example of a reading, and I'm just thinking, I think this was a year 3 question. Look how rich this is. So remember I talked about when you get to the year 3, you've got to have all that code under your belt? Because I not only had to answer a question on a device, but I also have to read all of this first, then jump over here and read this. So there's quite a bit to get used to. So if a child scores poorly on this,
actually let's reflect and go, we've got some work to get them assessment ready as well. But we don't want to teach to the test because we're here to teach them to be people, not to be testers. Okay? So this is one of the questions that you've got there. So what does Scott most likely listen to this story? Yeah. Okay, here we go. This is a year 5. This one here, you can't see this in my screenshot. You actually have to scroll down because it comes down to about here. You've got to read all of that before you can actually answer this question, which is Rosa's first party was disappointing. How is Rosa likely to have felt after the first party? So, and you're making those predictions. So there's a whole level of sophistication that you're imagining needs to sit alongside it as well. Now, when this is actually a writing one. So the writing, they write a story from a prompt for about 30 minutes or 25 minutes, but they also have to answer closed questions as well that tell us about that not so simple view of writing. Okay, so they've got to choose, and this was a year 4 question. Choose the best word, the word that best completes the sentence below. I think something, the best friends I have ever, they are the best friends. So they have to know about contractions, that's short for they are. Okay. And this is one they got wrong. So this is the sort of information we get back as film teachers. This is a year 6 writing question, not a reading question. Writing question, where they've got to read, and then what change should be made to the section in bold. So they're having to determine how to change that sentence structure.
So even some of the questions were what change needs to be made, if any. So it's the children deciphering the question as well, if any, because often kids will go, well, there needs to be a change made, but if they haven't read that if any, then there might not necessarily need to be a
So your child actually, when we observe them during writing time and doing everything else, might actually be a really good writer, but actually had a really bad day on this assessment. We cannot judge them solely on this. We need to take into factor all of that other stuff, the relationships, the observations, our goals that we've got in the books that map onto the curriculum. So yes, the results from these will be interesting, and we're not actually going to know where they sit on these assessments until after probably term 3, because they don't actually know themselves. They're building it as we're using it. So hence we're not putting them in the reports or anything like that, because actually they haven't given us the translation yet. So that could actually, it's just not relevant at this point in time. Okay, so basically in a nutshell, we teach the curriculum, the whole curriculum. We don't teach to a test. We don't teach to a formula. We're teaching them the breadth of what they need to know. We've got a whole bunch of things called progress markers that tell us how they're going. And then we have to put a descriptor on them. So I've actually got to go, Jodie, today, your descriptor is consolidating. Okay, I'm going to give her a descriptor. We've got 5 descriptors we can choose from. Okay, emerging, developing, consolidating, proficient, and exceeding. Those are our 5 descriptors we can basically give for reading, writing, and maths. Okay, and we give for each individual subject. There's a big description of what those descriptors actually means. So when we put out our reports at mid-year, we're going to send out a page in A4 that tells you a little bit, how to understand the report. And if you want to know more, click here. Dive as deep as you want. And then, of course, we're really lucky here. We have our parent conferences that week after, so you can actually ask questions like, what does that mean? Tell me more. What's going on here, and all of those bits. So that's why we've got that cycle of reports come out first and then. So in those descriptors, like I've talked about, it's actually made up from observation, learning tasks in their books, and also assessments, like the SMART, like the Phonics check, like the Dibels, like the Little Learners, all the assessments that we use.
and we use a variety of things. So last year we told you in your reports if your child was working towards, working at, working beyond, okay? The language that we will now use is emerging, developing, consolidating, proficient, or exceeding, okay? And you might be like, well, that's great, those are lovely words. But where's my child? How are they going? Are they going to make it? Okay? So there is this visual, and you'll get this as well with your reports, that at mid-year, consolidating is actually on track to meet the expectation or to meet the expectations of that year group. Consolidating, proficient, and exceeding all are. Okay? And you might be going, okay, but my child's always been working beyond. So are they going to be exceeding? Probably not, because unless they've memorised the whole of the year for curriculum, that year group, they probably haven't seen it yet. Okay? So they haven't been exposed to it yet, so how can they be exceeding in it until they're exposed to it? So for those children who might have been working beyond, at mid-year they might sit at proficient. Okay? And what you're wanting to see, if my child is at consolidating at mid-year, I'm wanting to see them get to proficient. I'm wanting to see progress. And at the end of the year, I just want to see progress. I want to see that they're making gains. For example, me, I've talked about myself. I was always the developing girl. Okay? I was always in that developing phase. Now, at mid-year, I was probably developing. But actually, at end year, I got to consolidating. Now, that wouldn't be meeting the expectation at the end of the year, but actually I made progress, and that needs to be celebrated. Okay? And that needs to be acknowledged because a lot of work goes into that progress.
Also, just saying that some of these year groups, they've had massive jumps, like especially in maths. They won't necessarily make the total progress that they would until, because they're having to really catch up with some things they've never been exposed to, because some of our kids, like in year 4, are doing work that previously our year 6 children would have done. So it will take them some time for some children to get to the level that they need to be, but they are making huge progress. It's just the bench has really lifted in this new curriculum.
The whole curriculum has basically changed on us, okay? It's become very explicit, which is great. We know what we need to teach. But if you were to look at the year 6 curriculum of what your children need to have, a lot of adults look at it and go, oh,
Bar has been raised.
well, you know, actually, can I write like that? You know, and I'm saying, of course, all of your teachers can, but it's very different from what we were taught. Like Jodie was talking about the syntax of sentence and the use of punctuation and all of those bits and pieces. So just knowing, coming back here, at mid-year, consolidating means they're on track, okay? At end year, though, we would want to see them at proficient to be on track. And that the ministry will talk to us about, well, if they're not on track, then the teachers will put in supplementary programs to support them, to make sure that they can still get there and access the curriculum. We don't hold them back, we keep going, but we keep working alongside and filling and scaffolding and filling and scaffolding. We don't put a ceiling on your children, we keep learning. Okay, so this is an example, and this is Sharon's report. And this is probably the biggest change. Your mid-year report's going to look like your mid-year report kind of did from last year, except we've got this new visual. This is kind of a ministry visual, and you'll have a circle that says where you are at mid-year. At the end of the year, it'll have a circle wherever it goes. I might be down here, I might have had a bad, mum and dad might have separated, and bad things have happened in my home, so things might actually go backwards. And it will show that progress over time. Okay. We'll also have a narrative comment that explains why we've actually put that descriptor there as to there and some next steps. Now the biggest thing I want to say is the next steps aren't for you at home. The next steps are what the teachers are going to do at school with your children. So it's not like, oh my gosh, now what do I have to do here? Okay. It's a case of it's keeping you well informed of what your teachers will be working on with your your children next. Okay, so no pressure there.
Yeah. Those next steps, are they written by the teacher specific for that child, or are they kind of the text that goes with where the dot is?
No, they're written. So some schools are using a drop down and we're not. Okay, we're not. And it is because, remember, I've talked a lot about information and data, and we take their temperature and all of that. We've got so much data or information. We write those next steps from that information. Okay, so actually, if Jodie needs to build her confidence to read aloud in front of us, I'm like, oh, she's going to hate me for putting that in a report, but I'm going to find a better way of phrasing that so that it's manner enhancing for her. But, I might be putting that, Jodie, next step would benefit from reading to a buddy eating class. I'm not going to make her read to the whole class straight off. But it's all of those little things and what the teacher will do. So it's individualised. Yes, of course, some children will have similar ones because they will. We are all different, but we are also similar in some ways.
But all proficient children won't have the same next steps.
No, not at all. Not at all. And not across the whole school either, because it's very different at year 6 from year 1. Okay, so, we've talked a lot, but just to end tonight, we're human beings, we're not, never born to read. Okay? We invented reading, okay, and then we had to teach every new generation. Each new reader comes with a reading fresh brain. It's like a fresh batch, okay? We have to teach it from scratch every time. So reading is not something that you naturally know how to do. Okay? To read stuff, you have to know stuff. To write stuff, you have to really know stuff. So remember I talked about the importance of talking to your children? They find out so much from us.
Knowledge and experience.
Knowledge and experience. Going to the supermarket is a big experience sometimes, the small things. It doesn't have to be the big things. And then the more words you know, the more words you will understand when reading. This contributes to the overall process and product of reading comprehension, but also writing automaticity. So the more times you're exposed to language, the more likely you are to use it, to decipher that tricky language that we have.
I think they all highlight the importance of that explicit and structured teaching of literacy.
And here at Te Mara, we pride ourselves in explicitly teaching your children, not leaving anything to chance and waiting for them to learn it. So that's, whoa, lots of information. Lots of information. But we pride ourselves on finishing at the time that we said we were going to. But if you do have any questions, feel free to ask. Look, I'm not that person who wants to ask in front of a group. I'm the quiet whisperer. So we're going to stick around. Feel free to stick around with us. Indy and Lottie are obviously having a great time with your children that are in there. So, does anyone have any questions they want to go to the floor with? Or,
before, with the data and the noticings of children and then doing that next step with the little learners, when would you inform home? Because what if we're making that same mistake or we've embedded that mispronounced sound? When would you let us know?
So one of the things we run with no surprises here at Te Mara. So we're not going to wait till the mid-year report to tell you. If something's not working for your child, we will be in touch with you in some form or some way. I know particularly in the junior school, if I think of Philippa Spencer, she's always there talking to people and just correcting things, and she's great at correcting me on my SWA, where I missay those M's and all those bits and pieces. So those conversations, so the teachers will be in touch with you. If your child, say in a phonics assessment, comes up as developing or emerging, they will be in touch with you. Okay? We are looking at creating a little report eventually that says how they've gone on that assessment, but we just haven't got there yet because we're building the plane at the same time as the ministry as well. So catching up And the small
Equally, if
family
you
ones.
notice something, just, as you said, just come on in or ask or email and
Yeah.
the teacher can help follow up as
Yeah.
well. Some parents want to know lots, some parents don't want to know anything, so just, yeah, let us know.
Okay, I'm going to stop the live stream. Oh, look. Oh, we can see who was watching. Oh, Maddie Bowler was. She gets star points. Now, the funny thing is I have to figure out how to stop it.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Finish.